Welcome back to the Shatkin First Down Buffalo pregame show. Rich Gensler joined by former Bill free safety Jeff Nixon, wore 38. Back in those days, Jeff, when those mesh jerseys, the holes were like this big on those jerseys. Remember those things?
Oh, I could tell you a story on that. When we played Miami in 1980 and we beat them for the first time in 10 years, I had a good game. I had 3 interceptions, fumble recovery, and I took my jersey off. The next day when I came in, that mesh jersey was gone. I never used it again, ever after that. Okay, now I didn't know what happened to it, but about 10 years after I retired, I went to the stadium to go to a game, and I see this guy coming down the concourse with about 10 other of his friends, and he's got my jersey on, that same jersey. Now, I didn't know it was exactly the same one until he got closer. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, where'd you get that jersey?" He said, "I used to work in the equipment room with the Bills, and I took it after a game, And I looked on the back just to make sure it had Nixon on it. And all of a sudden, all of his friends around him said, "Hey, that's Jeff Nixon. That's his jersey." And at the time, I felt bad. I said, "Look, wear it with pride, man. Go ahead." So he left and he went off. And the very next year, I went back to the stadium. I'm in the concourse. Sure enough, here comes the same guy. And as he's walking toward me with his group of friends, he's taking that jersey off and then handing it to me.
No kidding.
And I was like, "Man, that is so nice of you to do that. I really appreciate it." It is an important memorabilia that I, wanted. I really didn't take anything when I left. I didn't take my helmet or shoulder pads, cleats, anything. I left my jock hanging up in the locker. So yeah, that was, but those mesh jerseys were really thick and heavy. I mean, they had like a plastic material that was around the hole, to breathe. They weren't the best. I mean, they could have gone with a lighter substance, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, no doubt. 79 to 84. You were a hell of a player, man. And sadly, your career was short-lived because of a knee injury, which we've seen so often, especially to Bills guys, and especially to Bills guys in the secondary, guys like Derek Burrows, right, and Marlon Kerner, as the years have gone by, guys who had huge, like you, opportunity and big careers ahead of them. And sadly, it was injury that cost them their careers, which was a real bummer. I mean, you were an All-American in college coming out of it, which I want to ask you about. 1978, Bob Hope All-American show. I mean, I'm going down the list of some of these players. I'm like, oh my God. Baseball player Kirk Gibson from Michigan State, football player at the time. I'm looking at a bunch of future Bills with you. Butler, Bramer, Jim Richer, a guy that probably should have been a Bill, Tom Cousineau, right? I mean, man,
right.
What was that like? And what was that like being around that level player, especially you coming from a smaller school at Richmond and then, getting to be there in Hollywood, Bob Hope, the whole thing. What was that like?
Well, actually, it was it was in New York City.
Okay.
They did it right next to the set of Saturday Night Live. And, for me, it was just to meet an icon like Bob Hope, first of all, was just so amazing, And my dad, he was in the service and he was up in a place called Thule, Greenland. And Bob Hope went up there during a major snowstorm. And so he got the respect of all the military. I mean, he, for all the different things he did there, but I was just such an awe of him. But of course, also with the players that I I was with Kenny Easley and Johnny Johnson. We were the 3 safeties that were chosen. Kenny Easley's in the Hall of Fame.
Sure, yeah.
Johnson had an illustrious career. I just wish I'd have been able to stay healthy and join those guys. I really think I could have, done a lot of good things in the NFL if I'd have been, been able to stay healthy. I don't know. I'm not sure if healthy is the word to say because all football players are extremely healthy. Just, I had an injury and that happens, it's just amazing. Somebody like Tom Brady, just think if he'd have been in his first preseason game and got hit on his knee and it just, it's just there's a little bit of luck, I think, involved in being a player in the NFL and having that kind of longevity. It's just, obviously you want to be in the best shape you are, and most players are. So it's hard to say why some players get hurt and others don't. That idea of injury prone. When you play in the NFL, everybody's injury prone.
for a guy that wore a helmet to play their sport, you have, and maybe, I don't know, if there was a Hall of Fame of pro athletes for great hair, you're in it, my friend. You've always had great hair. You had great hair back then. You still do. You had a great stash back then. You still do. You look great.
You know what? You should have seen me about 2 weeks ago. I had let my hair grow. It was actually beyond my shoulders.
No kidding.
I was debating whether or not to let it keep growing, you know, and I started getting a lot of these things from people saying, "Hey, you look like Moses," you know. Like, you know, I got the Jesus thing too. I said, well, Jesus wasn't really a white man, but you know, I'll take the compliment, you know.
Right. You played on some really fun teams with a lot of really good players. I mean, you look at the Bills secondary when you were there, guys like I want to say Mario Clark maybe, and Charles Romes, and
Right.
Tony Green maybe, Steve Freeman, right? I mean, the Bermuda Triangle, right? And then on the offensive side, Fergie and Cribbs and Butler, and I think Frank Lewis back in the day, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We had you know, Chuck Knox was able to really assemble a good team. You know, he had people like Phil Delapiano and Isaiah Robertson, you know, and he kind of, you know, he just always made us feel like we were all in this together, that we were a team. And I just, you know, I think he's still in the top 10 as far as winning percentage in the NFL. We never did make it to the Super Bowl. You know, I played in 3 playoff games. We won 1 and lost 2. But, you know, it was such a great experience being with some of these guys like Mario, Charlie Romes. They were really good. As a matter of fact, in 1980, we had the best free secondary in the NFL as far as pass defense. We were, you know, just exceptionally good. Those guys, what amazed me is a guy like Mario Clark. In practice, he would get burned every day. He would look side, but in a game, he would just always perform. And I was like, what is it with you, man? He goes, on game day, it just all comes out, and I'm intuitive. You know, it's that being out on those corners, man, that is no job I would want ever, man. That is, I think that's the hardest job in the NFL, to be a cornerback, especially if you're going up against, you know, a guy like Dick, you know, some of these other players in the NFL. But you know, but yeah, what an honor to play with guys like Fred Smerlas, Shane Nelson, you know, Isaiah Robertson, Ben Williams, who passed away not too long ago, but you know, Sherman White, Steve Freeman was like, he was like our team captain. You know, he was the guy that kept us all together. He was just so smart. Maybe not the greatest athlete in the world, but he was always in position to make plays. And that's one thing I learned from him. He said, if you don't get in the right position, you'll never make the good plays, you know? And so I always took that to heart.
That's very interesting you mentioned that, because in the Bills' last game against Tampa Bay, you could argue that the officials might have not been in position to make the correct calls on both sides of the ball for the Bills in the second half. And I say that knowing Steve Freeman became an official right after his playing career.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm a little bit worried right now. You know, I like Micah Hyde and I like Jordan Poyer. I think they're really good safeties, but for the past 3 weeks, they've given up 50 plus touchdown runs, you know, because they're not getting in position. Like one time I watched Poyer, he just was too far ahead of the play, and the guy went right up the middle and took it in for a touchdown. And this past week, you know, we had another issue with that where the guy just went by. And you know, that's one thing I always prided myself in. When I was in there, I never let anybody get a long run other than maybe, you know, 20 yards or something. You know, I never let anybody take it to the house. And I tell you what, they got to be a little bit more careful about how they position themselves when they come up from that cover 2, or even if they're in single, you know, where they got a single safety. You know, when you come up, man, you've got to make sure you've got the right angle on the running back, and that you're really, you know, making a good tackle, because after they get by you, there's nothing but goal line looking at them. So
yeah, that being said, I mean, you've been watching this Bills roller coaster ride really since the first month of the season. It's, you know, October, November, and half of December has been, you know, like this. It's been a biorhythm, and now 2 straight losses. What do you make of the team going forward? I mean, it is really crazy. You thought it was crunch time against New England, then you thought it was crunch time against Tampa. Now it's really crunch time.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. They still have a path to the playoffs. If they can beat the Pats in their stadium and then maybe run the board, or because I tell you what, they still have it. It's just for some reason they're having some issues when they get inside the red zone again. And I think they'll get those figured out. They'll get that figured out. They made some. I think there was some bad coaching calls, when they tried to have Josh run 2 consecutive quarterback sneaks and he got stuffed on both of them a couple of weeks ago. Don't do that. They're letting, if they continue to run Josh Allen the way they're doing, he's going to get hurt before the end of the season. I'll put, anything on that. So they need to get back to the running game. Singletary did in a couple of the runs he showed some flashes, but I think, what's the new kid?
Breida.
Breida, yeah, I like him. I wish they'd get him more into the passing situations, get him the screen out there real quick, he moves really well in space, boy. I tell you what, I like that kid. Zach Moss, he's good. He's good for those power rushes where you need to get that 1 yard. Singletary, he's a first, second down back, more or less. And then, but you got to mix Breida in there too. You got to get him in the passing game, the screen game. You got to do something to slow down the pass rush. Our offensive line is kind of letting, some guys in there on Josh, and he's not only, Josh is big enough, I thank God, to be able to just shrug off some of these, guys that are coming in and then get good yardage. But I was really surprised that I guess they felt like Sunday's game was like, so critical that they would have to do anything to win it. And so they in some planned runs and they worked out pretty good. Let me say that they did, but there were a couple where, he could have got, it would have been the end of his season, possibly career.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just get back to the regular run game. You save those plays with Josh Allen for like really critical situations where it's near the end of the game. And I understand that, but not early in the game. Don't, that's just my own personal opinion. Some of the runs worked well, but I just think there's too much of a chance that somebody comes in. And not only that, Josh is not the best, protector of the football. He's, I've noticed, when somebody comes from the side or behind, they're going to get that ball out of there if he's not careful. So he needs to learn to start wrapping up when he gets in that kind of traffic.
Yeah, Brian, you would think Brian Dable has an easy job with all the people that he could get the ball to, but kind of the other way around, right? I mean, between all the gifted receivers, whether it's the wideouts or Knox, and then you throw in now 3 backs to get the ball, man, and then you throw in quarterback runs. He does not have an easy job, Mr. Dable, that's for sure. Interesting, Jeff. We're talking about the Panthers, and I'm assuming you would pick the Bills in this game. They're a mess, are the Panthers. And the weird thing about me talking to you and talking about the Panthers, I don't know if you knew this, but the Panthers offensive coordinator is named Jeff Nixon.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, you know what? I went on Google one time and I was like, I typed my name in. I just wanted to see anybody written anything. You do that from time to time. And I saw this Jeff Nixon. He's a black coach.
Yep.
He was before he coached in the NFL, he coached in college. I can't remember exactly where he was at, but and then he went into the NFL, and now here he is with the Panthers. But there's only one Jeff Nixon, you know that.
Yeah, of course there is.
I'm trying to hit up Google with the name Jeff Nixon because the more hits you get, the more like
that's right. That's
put
right.
you at the top of the page.
Well, listen, I suggest anybody that's watching this, Google the Bills Jeff Nixon, because there's a whole lot more to learn about this gentleman. Not only was he a fantastic football player, but he was an incredible advocate for past NFLers, and you still are, and an incredible R&B guitar player. Read up on that and more with this our guest today, Jeff Nixon, on Google. Or if you want to read about the Panther quotes, you can too. But go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. If you go, it's better to go to YouTube and type in Jeff. And
okay.
Because there you can see me playing music, my guitar, see different albums that I have on there, and every single one of the interceptions I ever had in the NFL, I was able to get on cassettes, VHS cassettes, and digitally put them in on YouTube. That's pretty interesting. The very last one I was trying to get, I couldn't get it. It was the very first game I started for the Bills against New England, and we were playing against them. And Grogan tried to throw a crossfield pass. I picked it off. I had 80 yards ahead of me, but John Hanna came over and was able just touch me a little bit, enough to slow me down. That Stanley Morgan and Harold Jackson were able to tackle me, but otherwise I'd have been out of there.
Yeah.
That was, but so anyway, I had put out on the web, I said, can anybody find the clip of that game? I wanted to get that, that highlight. Well, Steve Grogan said he had it. And so he's the one I intercepted. And I said, well, where can I get it? And he gave me this a guy's address to go to. And sure enough, the next day I had the video.
How about that? I mean, you talk about the NFL being a fraternity. There's a perfect example of it. Jeff,
It's
great
really-
to see you, man. Enjoy the game. Obviously, I think we usually ask a score prediction. I'm assuming you think the Bills are going to win.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But they need to understand any given Sunday, look
Right.
what happened when they were in Jacksonville,
For sure.
So anyway, Rich, hey, it was a pleasure talking with you, man. Anytime you want me to come back, I'll stop in.
Would love to, man. I appreciate it very much. Jeff Nixon with us here on the Shatkin First Down Buffalo pregame show. Coming up next, we get the members of the Mafia in at Sorrentino's with what we call the huddle. We'll do some Tino's dough, then we'll break down the Bills and Panthers all coming up. Stay right here.
Go Bills. Yeah, all right.
Awesome, man.